You could say an embarrassing game for the Browns nevertheless, but the Bengals were embarrassed, the Jaguars were really embarrassed. A lot of embarrassing football for a lot of teams this past weekend. Plus, we have a lot more football coming up. Stick around, it's Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. As always, like and subscribe if you enjoy the show, and please make sure to check the show out on social media or me. You could find me on Twitter/X at HotyAndrew. You could find me on Instagram at Hoty Raw Takes or Facebook Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty for all the updates you need to know on Raw Takes. Hope everyone had a great weekend. If your team won, congratulations. My team did not. The Browns stunk on Sunday. It was a disaster. The New York Giants I actually picked to win the game. A lot of people in town did not. The reason I did was because of exactly what we just saw. The Browns just don't look like a very good football team right now. Now, I think the potential for them to be very good is there. I've seen it all on paper so far. I've seen the talent level of almost everyone on the team as well, excluding DeJuan Jones, who was just awful in that game. I don't think he's very talented one bit. I blame Bill Callahan for his success last year, which is a good thing, but we are missing Bill Callahan on the offensive line. Greg Newsome just making an idiotic mistake to go head-to-head with Daniel Jones on a play that would have been an interception and a game-changer if that play would have never happened. Well, at least the penalty never happened. I just think the Browns just had an all-around bad game. They were terrible. I mean, terrible on every facet, all phases of the game. The defense deserves blame, too. Even though the second-half defense was really good, the first-half defense was really letting up some short bombs that Daniel Jones had to keep throwing. And I mean some short bombs. The Browns' defense isn't very good at the short passing game. They're good at the long passing game, and they're great at bringing pressure. But the short passes are what the New York Giants won on. And I think they kind of exposed that about the Browns' defense. And Jim Schwartz is going to have to get back to the X's and O's a little bit, because I think the defense was very flawed and let the Giants have some long drives in the first half. And that was a problem. Now, the chemistry with Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson started to come to life a little bit. That actually excites me about the Browns moving forward. And the other thing why I have a little bit less of a concern is if the playoffs were today, the Browns are the 7th wild card. The 7th spot in the playoffs would go to them. So that makes me a little bit more, I should say, okay with the fact that we're in this kind of position. Someone in the AFC who has a losing record right now is going to get a playoff spot. Someone at the end of the season. Who it will be is to be determined, but that's the way it looks right now. All the teams that have winning records are in, and one team with a losing record, the Browns, have that 7th wild card spot. So someone with a losing record is going to get in the AFC, which is why I feel a little bit better. With that being said, it's still early on in the year. The Giants, I think, are underrated. I don't think they're a great team, but I don't think they're a bad one. And I think Brian Daboll's a very good head coach. I think Daniel Jones is underrated based on how he played the other day. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is great, but this is a quarterback that does have a playoff win on his resume. I don't think you should take that away from him. The Giants are in okay shape. I just think the Giants are in okay shape. I don't think they're a great football team, but they're a respectable one, and I think we'll see that towards the end of the year. Now, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff happen in the NFL this week. I mean, who thought Carolina was going to come out and just obliterate the Raiders the way they did? Who thought the Vikings would start 3-0 with Sam Darnold? Who thought the New Orleans Saints were just going to blow out two teams, including the Cowboys, back-to-back to open the year? A team that I said was a Super Bowl contender just after they beat the Browns. I was clearly wrong. The Cowboys are still the Cowboys of old. So there's a lot of headlines around the NFL right now. And the Browns are still definitely in the thick of it. But the Browns have a long way to go. Deshaun Watson, I don't think deserves blame for this game, but he definitely doesn't deserve credit. He wasn't great. I saw some great athletic plays on his legs. I'm not going to blame him for getting sacked. That's on DeJuan Jones for being one of the worst offensive linemen I've ever seen. But Deshaun Watson deserves a lot more credit on the aspect of the fact that he was okay in that football game in the first half. We saw some of that chemistry with Amari Cooper. So for me to say that Deshaun Watson is done would be an understatement. It's still in Deshaun Watson. We've seen flashes of it. It's just going to be, can he put it together throughout the remainder of the season after a 1-2 start? Deshaun Watson has the original Deshaun Watson in him. It just has to come out more consistently. And I think we saw flashes of that against the Giants. Now, a lot of people in town are going to just completely blame Deshaun Watson because they just don't like Deshaun Watson at this point. And I say that's fine. Let's just wait the rest of this season. We're paying him all that money. let's just see a big sample size of a lot of Deshaun Watson. Because we haven't seen a 10-game sample size of Deshaun Watson on the field since Houston. We just haven't seen it. So after 10 games of seeing a Deshaun Watson sample size, we'll have a real idea if he could ever be the Deshaun Watson of old again. But as a collective, the Browns were terrible. The coaching was bad. And I love Kevin Stefanski, but that was a badly coached game. And that includes the defense too. Jim Schwartz did a bad job with the short defense. There is no short passing defense for the Browns. At least they showed that in the first half. No short passing defense. Problem. Ken Dorsey. I'm actually starting to question him. We're looking at Buffalo's offense right now. They got rid of Ken Dorsey and their offense has absolutely exploded. We brought in Ken Dorsey and we've seen nothing of the sort of old Josh Allen or anything. The Buffalo Bills might have been right to get rid of Ken Dorsey, and so far the Browns maybe are reaping the fact that they have Ken Dorsey. But you can also blame the fact that Kevin Stefanski is still calling plays. I still think Kevin Stefanski as a play caller can be pretty darn good. I just think he had a bad couple games. He called plays great in the Jacksonville game. So the Browns have a lot of adjustments to make on the X's and O's of football. It's just that simple. Will they be able to get it done? I think they can. They have the Raiders next week in Las Vegas. That's going to be a tough place to play for the Browns. But I think the Browns fans will show up to that stadium, kind of take it over a little bit over in Vegas. And I also think that the Browns are in prime position to win. We just saw how bad the Raiders looked against the Carolina Panthers. I was very harsh about the Carolina Panthers on this show. I'm going to give them credit for the fact they made the quarterback change, and so far it's working out for them. And Andy Dalton absolutely exploded. Now, there's film on him now, so I don't know if that's going to last too much longer in Carolina. But Carolina did a much better job than I thought they would, and they blew out the Raiders. And I think, as I said, that's because of lack of film. I still think the Raiders are better than that game. They still beat the Baltimore Ravens. We have a long way to go. A lack of film on Andy Dalton, I think, is really what hurt the Raiders last week. But that being said, that opened my eyes to the fact the Browns have a chance this week. This is the game I thought they were going to lose if they started 2-2 and they would beat the Giants. But right now, I think I actually like the Browns to beat the Raiders going into this week. But we'll talk about that towards the end of the week on the next edition of Raw Takes. Let's talk a little bit more about the landscape of the NFL right now. So we have 5 undefeated teams. I'm going to categorize this based on who I think is real and who I think is kind of fraudulent. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are the real deal, obviously. Now, they've been in very close games, so I think eventually they will lose one, but they are on pace to go 17-0, so I'm not going to just say they'll lose right away. I guess that Atlanta could be a team that would upset them. I was clearly wrong. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Justin Fields is becoming a dual-threat quarterback. They scored 20 points this week. The offense has kind of come to fold slightly. And obviously, Justin Fields owns Jim Harbaugh. No pun intended, as a Buckeye fan. Go Bucks. And then you look at the fact of Minnesota and teams like Seattle. I'm sure those are fraudulent 3-0s. I don't really buy into either one of them. Seattle had an easy schedule to kind of start the year. I think the Rams and the 49ers struggled early, but will pick it up late. And I still like the Cardinals to be feisty. So I think Seattle will come back down to earth at some point. Minnesota, I think the same way. They play Green Bay this week. I think Sam Darnold's kind of on cloud 9 right now. He's a good quarterback from what we've seen this year, but I think he could be a very good backup. I don't see him as a guy starting week in and week out, staying consistent. And must we not forget, when he was with the Panthers, he started 3-0, and the Panthers would proceed to go 5-12 that year. So I am in no way, shape, or form sold on Sam Darnold, continuing his hot streak with the Minnesota Vikings. But the Vikings should enjoy it for what it is right now. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills, who I think are absolutely legit. I picked them to win the division at the beginning of the year, regardless of their lack of wide receiver talent. It's all Josh Allen. Josh Allen is finding guys we've never even heard of with no Stephon Diggs there, and it's really helping the Buffalo Bills score over 45 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jacksonville Jaguars haven't fired Doug Peterson yet. I think this game against Houston will be the telling point. I thought the tipping point would be starting 0-3, but the telling point for me will be if they lose to the Houston Texans. That tells me the Jaguars aren't a well-coached team, so the tipping point will be them firing Doug Peterson. Now, there's been reports and rumors, I don't want to speculate things here, that Shahid Khan, the owner of the Jaguars' son, has been speaking with Bill Belichick, and they do have Mac Jones on the roster. That's something to point out. Is that something that could turn out to be a fact maybe at some point soon? Maybe. I don't think so, though. I do not think that would be a case, but it has been rumored. I've seen things out there. I don't know if anything's true or not, so I don't want to speculate. But if Bill Belichick ends up being the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars because they fired Doug Peterson, that might be an okay move. We'll have to see what happens. The Houston Texans clearly look flawed after they got blown out by Minnesota this weekend. So they're obviously not the real deal yet. I think they are the real deal, but not the real deal in terms of they're going to really take over and run the South yet. I think you look at Tennessee, they're clearly a mess. They're 0-3, one of 3 0-3 teams, including the Jags and the Cincinnati Bengals. And you also look at the Indianapolis Colts, who did get their first win, but I still think they have a long road to go with Anthony Richardson. But I like what I see from the Indianapolis Colts, as well as Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the best running backs in the game. The Indianapolis Colts, I still think, will be one of those middle-of-the-pack teams this season. So I think there's a long way to go. If you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I think Doug Peterson will be the first coach to be fired at this pace. But the other thing to keep in mind is there is a chance we see an 0-3 team make the playoffs this year. I really do. I think Cincinnati and Jacksonville can overcome these slumps to start the year. Will they? I think is questionable, but it's possible. Tennessee, obviously not. The last time an 0-3 team actually took over and won a playoff spot was the Houston Texans in 2018. Deshaun Watson quarterbacked that team, and they were off to a slow start, which is why I'm not even out on the Browns yet at 1-2. It's still early on in the season for all of these teams. I think by the time we see Week 6 and Week 7 roll around, we'll be able to get a broader picture of who the real deal is in the NFL. I think we could see slightly who they are. I'm not really ready to bet on Pittsburgh's offense yet. I still want to see more, but it looks good. Obviously, Kansas City's been there, done that. I believe in them. Buffalo has been to the AFC Championship at the very least. I'm sold on them. Minnesota and Seattle look fraudulent, so I'm not even putting my money on them. There's a long season to go in the NFL, but I do like what I'm seeing from certain teams. And we'll have to see what takes place going into Week 4. My predictions and thoughts on all those games you could see coming up on the next edition of Raw Takes. But before we make the transition to baseball, I am going to give my thoughts on the first Week 4 game between the Cowboys and Giants. I have the Cowboys coming back, overtaking the Giants, and getting back to where they need to go. I think the calls for Mike McCarthy's job also need to slow down a little bit. I don't think he's been the problem with the Dallas Cowboys. I'll just say that flat out. But I'm going to take the Cowboys to bounce back in East Rutherford, New Jersey, this upcoming Thursday over New York. All right, Major League Baseball season getting down to the wire. Only a couple games left for every single team left. The Guardians taking the Ohio Cup and clinching a number 2 seed is very, very crucial for the Cleveland Guardians. Unbelievable season they've had. I don't think anyone saw it coming. I was personally against the whole let's pop champagne after we win the division thing, especially after they lost to the St. Louis Cardinals on Saturday. But you know what? We'll take it for what it is. This season's been unbelievable, and they deserve to have a little bit of fun before the postseason gets rolling. And we've clinched that bye. Will we be able to overtake the New York Yankees? I still think that has yet to be seen, but Baltimore is still in the AL East race. If they win out and the New York Yankees lose a few more games and it all ends up being a tiebreaker 92-70 and 92-70, I think the Orioles have the season series tiebreaker. But I don't think that's going to happen. They did clinch a playoff spot, so the Baltimore Orioles will be in the thick of things there. But that's essentially your race right now with the first place teams. Obviously, if Baltimore does find a way to win the AL East, that would be great for the Guardians. We have the head-to-head series against them. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the New York Yankees will be able to secure home field advantage. With that being said, how do I feel about the Guardians right now going into the postseason? I'd say right now, let's take a little bit of a breath. We're not really going to get a great preview of a series with the Houston Astros because the Astros can't get a bye, so I think we're going to see the Guardians use a lot of the younger guys in the lineup. So I don't think that's going to be any kind of preview of a possible ALDS series if we end up facing the Houston Astros in the ALDS. But the bottom line is we're in the ALDS. We don't have to play a wild card series. We're automatically skipping the line and getting into the divisional series. We're 3 wins away as of right now from an ALCS appearance. 3 wins away. So the Guardians have to just kind of take the rest of the regular season on cruise control, get a few nice wins, get the younger guys ready to go, and let's get these pitchers warmed up, ready to start pitching some great baseball this upcoming postseason in October. It is going to be critical for the Guardians that the bullpen is well rested, that the starting rotation is ready to go. Guys like Tanner Bybee, Matthew Boyd, they have to be front and center in this rotation. And if we can get Alex Cobb back, great. Stephen Kwan needs to get out of his slump if we end up seeing him get off the injured list. I think that's going to be huge for the Guardians. I also think you look at guys like Jose and Josh being Jose and Josh Naylor. We also need guys like Lane Thomas to keep up what he's doing. David Fry off the lefties. We know what he can do. And you also take a look at Andres Jimenez. He got hot in September. Ryan Rocchio, I think, has gotten hot since late August and all of September so far. There is a long way to go for the Cleveland Guardians, and I am really, really excited to see what road they take. But the opponent matchup is going to be critical. Part of me wants to see the Houston Astros over the Detroit Tigers or Kansas City Royals, just because I think we can get more out of a Houston Astros series win and block them off getting them to the postseason. I think that's going to be huge for the Cleveland Guardians. Get an opponent that's a reasonable matchup. If they face the Baltimore Orioles, I think the Baltimore Orioles would be a great matchup. And that could be even later on in the postseason, who knows. But I will answer the question right now. As the team is currently constructed, would I take them to win a playoff series? I have my doubts. And the reason I have my doubts is just solely because this has already kind of been a Cloud 9-ish season. We've seen so much from them that exceeded a lot of our expectations. To me, the season was already a success, and I think we're going to start to see the gas kind of unravel as we enter the postseason. I'm actually more worried about our bullpen running out of gas, especially from the Cade Smith, Hunter Gaddis, Emmanuel Clase lineup, than I am anything else. I'm just nervous. I'm nervous we're going to just see some bad bullpen baseball from the Guardians because they had to hold the fort down essentially all season long. They really did. Now, it was a tremendous season. The season's a success either way. Obviously, we want to go win the World Series. That's what we're competing for. And I'm emphasizing that. But I want to also let everyone know, regardless of what happens in the postseason, this season was a success. And no matter what happens, even if we lose in the ALDS in a sweep, that is something to build upon for next season. Now, will that mean that we shouldn't go try to win it all right now? Absolutely not. We're in it again. This organization has been too damn good, in my opinion, the last 11 years, under Tito Francona and now Stephen Vogt, under the Antonetti era, to not have one World Series to show for it. And so if they can seal the deal and win the World Series this year, and it'll be very tough because I think there is a lot of baseball teams out there this year that could really get the Guardians' number, then I would say the Antonetti regime has been the most successful in Cleveland baseball since the 1940s. It's already looking like it possibly has been. The 90s Indians, obviously, have been up there too. So far, I would say up till the 40s, that's been the best era. But if you can cap it off with one World Series, we already know how criminal it was they didn't in the 90s. But if they can cap this whole 2010s to 2020s era with one World Series minimum, this is the most successful era of Cleveland baseball we've seen in a while. And that is something I'm really excited to see about. Also coming up later this week, we'll talk a little bit about the Ohio State Buckeyes and Big Ten play beginning. They easily rolled past Marshall, and we saw Will Howard have a great game and a great touchdown pass to tie it up early on against Marshall. I'm excited for Ohio State to get into some Big Ten play. These games are becoming more and more real. The bye weeks are over, all 4 of them that we got to open this season. This is Ohio State football. This is Big Ten football. It's college football at its very best. And we have the 12-team format series. I'm going to go into all of that later on Raw Takes this week. But as for today, that will wrap up the show. Hope everyone enjoyed my Raw Takes. I'll be back later this week. Like and subscribe. Check me out on social media. Once again, Twitter at Hoty Andrew, Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty, and Instagram, Hoty Raw Takes. I'm Andrew Hoty. Those are my Raw Takes, and we'll see you later this week right here on the show. Have a good one, everybody.